Welcome to Intersection Chats. I am Reme Mancera, a personal brand story strategist, and I am delighted to have here today Jessica. Welcome, Jessica. Thank you for accepting this invitation.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So, please, before we start into the proper conversation, tell us what you do, who you are.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Jessica Graham. I call myself a story coach. Um, I was telling Rema before that the whole thing of that led me here really is I was a teacher before. I've been teaching overseas for over a decade and learning about other cultures and other people through a story is what I was like, it cuts out all of the BS. And I decided to leave teaching and start a copywriting business. I love writing. When I was working with a lot of brands on developing their positioning and their strategy, I quickly realized that when we start with the story, when I knew the whole background as to why they started what they're doing, what their mission is, how it all ties together, it made more sense to move forward with the messaging. And so that became kind of an obsession because I love hearing people's stories. I want to know what drives you to make the decisions that you make, what has happened in your past that kind of like plays into what you do now. And so I was helping a lot of solopreneurs with their stories, but once they got like a clear idea of the transformations that they've experienced and how those mirror what they are helping their clients achieve and their clients do, there was a lot of disconnect between um, not feeling empowered enough to really share that side of their story. They felt like it didn't position them to be an expert. They felt like it kind of was embarrassing to share. There was a lot of shame around it. And my own journey started like 15 years ago where I got into some therapy. I did a lot of self help stuff that helped me unpack any of the shameful stories that I was carrying around. Because I always knew like when you carry that stuff around and you're not able to even be honest with yourself about it, much less somebody else, it's like these little skeletons are in the closet and they're just running the show. And so I was like, maybe I could help people kind of do what I've been helping myself do. And I started to help women really rewrite their stories. So taking those experiences that might have felt not not empowering enough and really shifting the perspective by unpacking all of it and being really, I always say, radically honest with yourself about it and being like taking ownership over your role, blah blah blah. And I think that that's really where I land today, is like helping women really rewrite the stories that are running the show and helping them make decisions that feel like it's more their decision rather than doing it because it's going to make other people happy.
Mm, yeah, and this is something that I feel so important. How when we are working around the stories that we share for our business, and how they are like that connection with the stories that we tell to ourselves. That all these conversation, how important it is, and this idea of being honest with ourselves. So I feel that's really a crucial element to it as well. So let's go into the topic. We can talk about so many angles here because of how both of us we talk about stories, but it will be about how personal brand story intersects with story-driven messaging. How when we are focusing on this way of having a messaging with based on stories, how the connection between them and our personal brand story. How has been your experience with clients? What is your point of view?
Yeah. I really find that like when we lean into what our own experiences are and what they've been, and we start to see like what's the transformation that I've gone through, what are the challenges that I've overcome, that is really your unique superpower. Because a lot of us think that like there's two sides to this. A lot of us think that no one else would understand what we've been through, and so we don't want to share it. And I always say that that's kind of the unicornism that we carry around. But on the flip side, it really is a unicornism in a lot of ways, because how you have dealt with something, or how you have managed through and navigated through a different challenge or hurdles or whatever it was, that is like your unique superpower. So whatever angle you want to see it as, it's very relatable. So when you share this stuff, even if someone hasn't been through like the details of what you lived through, they can see themselves in your story, because they're like, oh yeah, I've faced a challenge that was kind of similar, or I've, gone through something that I really didn't know how to navigate it. And the way that she's articulating how she navigated, that really speaks to my heart. And so I think now we know, especially, that people really connect with people. And so if you are sharing your experiences from that like human perspective, then you're going to draw people in to really know who you are and kind of get like a inside peek at, this is how they think, this is how they process, and maybe it's very similar to you, and maybe it's completely different, but it challenges the way that you see your own life or how you navigate things. So that's where I think like the intersection is. I always say that like your story really is your purpose. I think we have a responsibility to look at what we have lived and kind of unpack what is there, because I think a lot of us navigate life through the lens that we think that like we have all of these beliefs. Like, I was born this way, this is just kind of how I do things. But then when you start to really examine things and strip things back a little bit, you realize some of that stuff was actually other people's beliefs that I just like, okay, agreed to. And I think when you start to really unravel that and look at it, you're able to really know who you are on such a deeper level. And the more you know who you are on a deeper level, it's so much easier to show up in your business or in relationships and really be like, this is what I value, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe is important. And it doesn't matter so much anymore of like, what are other people going to think? What are other people going to say about this? It's like you get such an inner confidence from knowing your own story.
Mm. I feel really aligned with what you just shared, because I feel like even doing the process of identify which stories to share and all that is a deep process of even self awareness of your own journey. I work a lot with people that they have made some kind of pivot in their business, so they are in this transitional moment, and going through that process of understanding which stories to share is also understanding, okay, how all these milestones in my path has helped me to move to where I am now, and how each of those is like showing up, how there are certain things that are important to me, no matter the if I am working something totally different. There is this common thread coming up, because those are your values, things that are important to you, why for you it's important to work with a certain group of people, and how you work around a certain topic or problem is related to who you are, and using your stories to highlight, to provide this context. I feel the same, like it's like helping others to show that you are someone relatable, and how even if you haven't experienced the same experiences, you connect with the emotions, you can get takeaways from their lessons that they have lived through that. So I feel that as well, how First of all, it's an interesting process to ourselves when we are learning about our own stories and how they are connected. And then, in a strategic way, it's like how that will help your audience and people that get around you to know, like, okay, this person has certain values. And then it's showing your unique combination of your story, your background, your expertise, and who you are, your personality. So, that I feel is so important, and how you can use that, of course, in your messaging and in your communication in the different levels. So yeah, how has been your process? I don't know if you have found a lot of people, because this is something that happened to me, that they feel that their story is not relevant for others or for their audience. I have a podcast and it's called "Who Cares About My Story?" because that's a question that a lot of people resonate with. So, how has been your experience? Have you worked with people that they have this um, feeling at the beginning before working with you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's very common. A lot of people think like my story doesn't matter. Why would anybody care? Um, or they think that like it's not big enough, because I think
Mhm.
that a lot of us see these like really big before and after moments, and they think like, well, I don't, mine's not that big or mine's not that crazy. But I always think that like, we all have those before and after moments, even if they're not as big. But to what you were saying before, it's like everybody still finds a point of relevance, or like they resonate with something that you are sharing because they themselves can like see themselves in your story. They are drawn to it in some kind of emotional way. And I think that it really has a lot to do with like how you share that story and what the perspective is that you have on it. That's why I think like when you start to unpack, because if you think your story really doesn't matter, it's probably because you really haven't, you yourself, dissected like, what are the lessons that I really learned from this? What gifts has this experience given me? What have I taken from these experiences that now I give back to other people? And like, how am I using this to my best? Like, how am I really taking these hardships and like shifting it into something that's a positive? And so I think that that's where like maybe a little more digging into needs to happen, because if you do think that like you don't have a story that matters or it's not relevant, I would suggest to look at it a little more closely and like come at it from perhaps a different angle. Cause sometimes too, like I think we all experience this when we're like so close to our own stuff. It's so hard to like pull back and see it from a different angle, from a different perspective. And so that's why I think when we talk to other people about things and we start to like openly share and kind of get their insight, it's magical. Like I talk with clients so often and they're just like sharing their stories. Nothing, they didn't come into it thinking like, oh, I'm going to tell Jessica this one story. They're just telling me about whatever their life experience is. And I am like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. And they're shocked that someone is saying that because they weren't thinking that it sounded that, moving. But I always like to share with them why. Like when you said this, I felt this. And I think when you start to like see, oh, that really like resonates with people, I didn't realize that, then you start to feel more confident to share more of your experiences.
100%. This idea of how we overlook certain stories that for us are natural, and then for others can, yes, be so, oh, this is so uh, a story that if you use it will be memorable, has this visual element. I remember especially one, I was working with someone, she's copywriting for fashion brands, and we were working on her story. And in the questionnaire, I have this questionnaire before our sessions, and so she didn't mention, and also during the process, she didn't mention any connection with the fashion as a child. And so I during the session, I asked her, and I was thinking that maybe she was going to tell me about making these little dresses for her dolls or something like that. Because I asked, hey, what is your first memory around fashion? And then she started talking to me and telling me how she remember being under the sewing table of her mom, because her mom was a tailor, her grandpa was a tailor. So she grew up in this family making high quality clothes with a lot of detail to attention, taking care of their customers. And to me, it was like I got good fun when she told me. It's like, wow, this I have the picture of you as a little child playing there, and it's like this was a moment she haven't shared, because she was also all the time looking for stories related to writing and related to the copywriting side, but she didn't think about sharing this. And and to me it was clear that this is something that you can share in a memoir, because of it's memorable, but also because there is a lot of values there that you were during that process and can connect with, as you said, something relatable to other. And sometimes for ourselves we overlook those, and I always say that you don't need an epic story, because it's like you need, I like to help people identify these meaningful moments, and I call it that way because, yeah, when you share what is around that moment, there is sense, there is context of why that there is this connection. Of course, I look for the strategy side and how they are connected to something that is valuable for your audience and the people that might use your services or your offers. But it's like it's important. There is this feeling of it's important for you, so you are sharing with confidence, because when you are not sure about why you are sharing certain story, it does it's not going to land the same way. I don't know how
Totally.
has been your experience, but it's like no matter if for you is an amazing story to share, if the person doesn't see or doesn't understand how they is going to be relevant, they are not going to share with the confidence and the trust. You need to be sure that, yeah, this is the story that I want to share. So I feel that there is this power is so different when it's like from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always call that owning your story. It's
Mm.
like the difference between like knowing it and being really owning it. And I think the ownership of it really comes from feeling empowered by it. Because, like you're saying, if you are coming from a place of like, I'm not really sure this anyone's going to care about this, or like, I don't know if I want to reveal too much, like energetically already, you're coming from a place of like hesitation. And so it's not going to be received in the way that it could be received if you're coming from that place of like owning it and feeling very empowered by your own story. So yeah,
Mm. Yeah, and yeah, I wanted to go into this topic because you mentioned how, like, when you are not sure about how many details you want to share, and this is a topic that is really important to me because I am a really private person, and I when I work with people, I always like to highlight that you are the one in control of which is the level of detail that you are sharing. I would love to know your thoughts about that when people are concerned about how much to share or being concerned about not oversharing. What has your experience around this topic?
yeah. My experience is when I first was getting this like help. So 15 years ago, I kind of reached a place in my life where I was like, I just can't live the way that I'm doing things anymore. And I didn't have any answers. And so I started going to therapy. And the therapist also suggested some 12-step Al Anon stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's just like going to meetings and really talking about like what are your behaviors and how are your behaviors impacting other people and impacting you. And so in those rooms, that's when I really saw people sharing their stories in a very honest and open way. And it was something that I wasn't used to. I had never witnessed that before. I had never seen people really be vulnerable in a way like that, especially with like a group of strangers. And so I took a lot of lessons from that because I felt like I knew that when you could start to be more open and vulnerable with your own story, and I'll get into like how this can tie to your business, but like on a personal level, when you can be more vulnerable and open like that, you're bringing stuff that like feels shameful and feels kind of icky or whatever into a place where like light can finally be shed on this stuff. So like keeping it hidden in a closet and never sharing it with anybody, never being honest with yourself about it either, it's going to fester, and it's just not, it's going to keep you stuck in a certain place. So I find that when I learned how to be vulnerable, which I believe vulnerability is a skill, when I learned that skill, I also learned like you can have discernment too, because I don't need, me being vulnerable doesn't mean that I go out and I share every little itty bitty gross detail of my life with everybody, and that's being vulnerable. It's more about knowing what needs to come out of me, like knowing what needs to be confessed and what I need to take ownership over. And then knowing then like how to work through it. Like it's very much about it taking an inventory of your own decision making, your own behavior, your own choices. And when you can start to do that or like dissect everything, then you can look at it and be like, okay, I really like this about myself and I really want to work on these things. And then once you can do that and you get to a place where like you might find those meaningful moments like what you shared of like how do you share those meaningful moments? I like to look at it and like those transformation moments, like what are those kind of little befores and afters in your life that maybe those can really impact somebody else. And so sometimes though you get to that point where you start to look at those meaningful moments, transformation moments, and it still feels too personal. I always say there's like a few different ways that you can look at it. Either like if it still feels too personal, I always say don't share it yet, because going back to what we said way earlier, which is like the energy in which you're sharing it from. So if you're not comfortable sharing it, just don't yet. But I always say the yet because it might be something that like today I'm not ready to share this story, but maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe next year. And so kind of put a pin in it. And then as you put the pin in it, is it a message? Like, what is the purpose behind the story? Are you trying to share a message that you really believe people need to hear? They really need to hear the message behind the story. And if it's a yes, then can you flip it where it's really not maybe your personal story and your experience, or can you make a generalized story out of it? Like it doesn't have to take that like this personal thing happened to me and now I'm sharing it. It could be somebody else experienced this, or we're going to leave out all the details and just kind of share the message itself. So there's ways that you can like still get that message across to people without like slandering other people, which I always am like, don't do that, or exposing too much of your own stuff that you're not ready to. So that's how I approach all of that. But I'd like to hear like, what do you think? What is your approach to that?
Yeah, I really like that approach because it's like, yeah, giving them the control of how to do it if they want to go to another. In my case, I usually, because the how I approach the work of a personal brand story, I identify 10 story connectors. I call them story connectors.
Yeah.
They are the combination. In one side is one meaningful moment in your journey, and the other side is a key factor of what you offer. That way, you have this set of 10 stories, and each of them has a connection with what you want to highlight from your offer. So, for choosing those 10, I always invite we go and explore the whole journey and then starting identifying how they can connect. And what is really important to me is if it's a moment that they don't want to go really into details or they are not comfortable with, they have the this boundary to decide not to do so, because you can choose others. It's not that you know that this is important. I feel like during the process it's important that they recognize and they acknowledge that, yeah, this moment is meaningful to me. I don't want to share it for whatever reason, but I know that this is important to who I am and what has been my journey.
Yeah.
And then when they decide to choose one of those, is like, what is the level of detail that you want to share? Because you can share in a superficial level about the moment
Right.
story, but then you are highlighting the lessons, you are highlighting the emotions that you live there in that moment, and then the focus is more into those that can be something that people will relate to than specific details about that moment. And is on them if they really want to share or not. And also some other option that I always like to invite them is to think about the different places where you are using those stories, and how maybe in your social media is something super superficial, but then in your email newsletter you feel there is more intimacy there, so you share a bit more. And then maybe in your onboarding process you are using your story as a way to create this safe space, and sharing your vulnerability will help then your clients as well. So even that could be, it's not that okay, this is how I share my story. No, it will also be different in different scenarios. And
Yeah.
as you say, it's going to evolve, and maybe what you share now is going to be different of what you share later, especially because you are going to evolve, your business is going to evolve, so your stories will evolve as well, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love too, like, I usually take this suggestion on myself, but I also share it with other people that once you have these stories, it's so good to just practice them at networking events.
Yeah.
That's such a good place to just like, you know what, I'm going to test this one out today.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I always when because one of the places that I invite people to use their stories is in the intro when they go to networking places and introduce themselves. And I have done a lot of online networking events. So there they have these breakout rooms and you need to introduce yourself. I think that's how we met actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when you are introducing yourself, you, especially if you are in a Zoom call, you are seeing the faces of others and you see if they make some, oh, they are not understanding what I mean, or they got curious and they ask you more. So it's a super good place to practice. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Because I think too, like social media is a great place to also practice, but you're not getting the like live exchange that you get at a networking. So yeah, that's so
Yeah, and something that I would like also to know that about your process, because during the work that I do, I help them to articulate how they are sharing the story, especially when they are like talking about that, more like writing. Because I am not a copywriter, so I work with them more in how, if they are going to a podcast and they are going to be a guest, or if they are introducing themselves, so more in like the oral way.
yeah.
And I like to work with them in how they can share the same story from different angles, and maybe starting in the middle of the action, so you get like, oh, I want to know more. Or maybe they start in the benefit that they want to highlight and then talking about the story, or the opposite way around, and they use the story as a bridge to talk about the benefit or the value that they want to highlight. So I would love to know, how is your process? How do you help them also to think about this, te- telling the same story in different ways?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the brand story, I take a lot of what you just shared too with like the different ways to outline it. So like yeah, starting with the hook and the excitement and practicing this, and this story could actually work really well from this angle, and I would say it like this. So we can have those like strategy sessions where you're going over this. When it comes to like the personal story, which is like a lot of where my work is now, the last piece of what we're doing is like what I call the embodying part. So it's like, how are you embodying this more authentically you version of the story? Because now we did all the stripping away of everything. We did the reframing and the rewriting. So now, how are you like embodying this next part? And there's a few things, and I think that it really comes down to like you figuring out what feels good. I always say like there's rituals. Like I love like if you have a morning ritual or however it is, your daily ritual, your nightly ritual, but having something that is a constant reminder of who this version of you is. Because I think when we do that kind of work, and I say this from personal experience, I can have those moments, especially as women, because I feel like we're a little, there's a lot of different waves happening in our bodies every month.
Mm,
So like sometimes I feel very connected to this like version of myself that is a lot more courageous, a lot more aligned with like who my true authentic self is. And so it's easier for me to kind of make decisions from that mindset and to really step into showing up on networking events or showing up on calls from that mindset. But then you have those other times when maybe you're tired or maybe you're a little moody or whatever it is, and like you easily slip back into those old patterns and those old ways of maneuvering. And so I always try to talk about like how can we have a ritual where we're reminding ourselves of this new stuff. And
mm,
one of them is scripting. So I'm a big journaler. I love a journal. And so I really love the practice of scripting, which is like writing from a place as though it has already happened, or
mm,
writing from that kind of higher version of self place. And maybe putting out different scenarios of like even this, if we're showing up on a live stream podcast today, talk and script out like how you felt when all of that happened and how empowered you felt when you shared that one story that you were kind of scared to share or whatever it is. And I also think that like, having that grounded kind of meditative process is also really helpful. But I think there's so many things that you can do to really start embodying that version of your story. And like we're talking about practicing, and I think that that's like a huge part of it. Sometimes it really does feel like you're pretending to be someone else, like act as though it is that other version of you making the decisions today, having those conversations today, and then like it suddenly is like, oh, but I'm actually doing it, like I'm actually living this. So that's one of the things that I like to work on, and I know it's a little more woo woo and not as like strategic, but I think there is kind of that practice in like
mm.
journaling, writing, being very aware of your own behaviors.
Mm. Love that idea of practicing. I feel that, as you were saying, vulnerability is a skill. I feel storytelling is also a skill that you, with the practice, you feel more comfortable with. I always invite people to check what is the style of communication that they feel more comfortable. Is they if they prefer to write, if they are sending audios to their friends, if they are
Totally.
comfortable doing video, because then use that as the first step to practice how you share your stories, because that's the natural way for you to tell story, to tell something to a friend, to yourself.
Mhm.
So use that channel as the first step, and then let's say you want to move to a different scenario, okay, then you practice that as well, but start with what feels natural and make things easier for you.
I love that. And that's such a good point because, like, I'm a writer, like, I love writing. So, for the majority of my business, I've always been more of a writer and I craft these like carousel posts and a post and it's all written. But then I realized there's such a disconnect between me writing out what happened and being able to like edit what is being shared there and how I'm sharing it versus speaking about it. So then
Mhm.
I realized like I really need to practice a lot more of the speaking part. And it's not necessarily speaking in order to be on a stage and having it like perfectly crafted and your TED talk and you know how you're going to stand, but it's just like having conversations like this. And it really is like one of the things I forgot to mention in my practice is the mirror work. Like, I feel like that's something that I recently adopted more of. And it's funny because when I heard about it, I was like, oh, I did this when I was a little kid, but I never put two and two together that like you can still do it. but it's just kind of pretending like you're acting out something that
Mhm.
hasn't happened yet, but you are like, and you can literally do it in the mirror so that you kind of get an idea of like what you look like when you're saying this stuff, you know? And I think that that's a really good way to practice too before you're getting on these calls. If you're still a little hesitant, a little mirror work is a good practice.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Something that because you were mentioning, and I feel this is important. It's not just about when you are sharing to be in a stage or a TED talk or anything, even just to have a conversation like this, or even if you are doing sales calls and how you are telling your stories, using your stories to highlight those benefits and for the other person to learn about who you are and to have an informed decision to make,
Right.
right? So I feel like that's like key as well. And I love this exercise of the mirroring, something that I told how we do kind of role plays because with some people that they are going to be in podcast and maybe they are still hesitant, we play that role where I am doing interviews and then they are sharing with me. And then it's like that process. You are experience how it feels. It's not the same, of course, but it's a practice. So it's
Right.
the first step to practice and to get more comfortable, to see how it lands better, because you know how it is. Sometimes the same story you are telling several times, and then someday you share in a bit different way or something. It's like, oh, actually, I like this angle. I am going to share this, and then you keep refining and polishing and making it more owning your story, as you said before, like this process of getting more comfortable sharing those.
100%. And it's like exactly what you said, because the more that you talk about it, the more that it just becomes a second nature. Because if
Yeah.
you're not practicing and you're just showing up on a call and you say it one time, I know this from my experience, I would be like a little shaky and like so nervous. And then you kind of have this like out of body experience. And then afterwards, you're like, what did I even say? So I think it's really good to practice so that you kind of know like this is what it feels like. This is how you're going to feel, and you get into that mindset where it's like you're calm. You're not like
Mm.
hovering in this like shaky space of trying to share
Yeah.
your story.
Yeah, and from my experience, I also know that I was not comfortable learning one way of sharing my story, and then it's word by word. And I went to a different podcast interview, and it's like, okay, here I go again, saying the same words next to each other. It's like I don't feel comfortable. I feel that if you listen to this one, it's again. So for me, it was really important to how I can share the same story in a different way or different, and that's also was part of me helping having these different meaningful moments that I can start with, because then I can combine the order in a different way. And it's not that the people will remember word by word, but I am feeling like a robot telling the same words. So it's
Yeah.
helping my confidence. And this is the key is sometimes it's not about the others, how they will maybe not remembering word by word, but you are feeling like, okay, here I go again. And then you don't feel like confident and owning it. So for me, that was an important process as well to learn to share the same similar stories, my story. So it's there is elements that are common, but in different ways. So I don't feel like if I miss a word, I am just losing my thoughts and my mind go to okay, which word this word doesn't matter. It's a story. I can use different words.
Right. And it's fun because, like, I'm sure this is your approach too, of just kind of helping them have a few, I call them signature stories, but a few stories that you can just like pull out of your pocket that really showcase who you are and what you do. But also, maybe it's like maybe one version of the story is specific to a client journey that you took them through. Maybe another version of your story really highlights the value that you have in this one area. And so you kind of have those like back pocket stories that when you're in those moments and you've practiced them a lot, just whip one out. You kind of know, okay, I'm going to share this one and it goes this way. And then you also know why you're sharing it. I think that's like the biggest thing is like if you're just sharing something but you don't know why you're sharing it, it's going to come across really
Mm.
empty.
100%. I feel that's like the key, and that's why I put together this framework of the 10 story connector, because each of them has a category, so you know why they are connected to something specific. So one of them is related to your values, one of them is your connection with your audience, one of them is related to the approach that is unique from your, even if there are someone else offering something similar. So each of them you can combine several of them, but you know exactly if you bring that specific story. That's why I use the sample of the sales call, because my
Yeah.
clients, they use that is like, okay, I want to highlight this because that person are not sure about this point, so they use specific story because they remember how they are connected, and they don't need to be big epic stories. They are meaningful moments and as a bridge to talk about that topic. So 100% what you just were saying.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so we are going to start wrapping up. So, something that we haven't mentioned, or a message that you would like to highlight and we haven't covered, maybe this is the opportunity for you to share whatever we haven't covered.
Yeah, sure. I think the only thing that we haven't really covered is I touched on it with my love for journaling. And one of the things that I started to do is host a monthly, I call it a journaling circle, but the point and purpose of it is to get on, and it's women who come together. We have a reflective prompt. And the prompts are always like there's a theme. So, for example, this month is reflective. And so we're really like going back through and kind of reflecting on what this year has been like and what
Mhm.
is uncovered and what patterns are there. So we'll have a couple of prompts that we take some time collectively to journal on. And then once that is finished, then we have an open share portion. And that's where I think that it's funny because I started this because I felt like I was going to all these networking calls. And especially in the beginning of my business, I felt like I was always rattled. Like I was in this very messy middle. I felt really alone. I felt like not a lot of people understood. And you're getting this like presentation as though entrepreneurship is great. You just started and then maybe you have a couple hiccups, but all of a sudden you're successful and it's great and it's perfect. And I was just like, am I the only one who has not experienced this? And so I wanted a place where people could come together and just kind of share what was really going on. And it didn't have to do with business, but just in life, because that's the other thing that I think a lot of us experience and learn very quickly is like, you no longer, I think when we work in jobs, it's easier to have like your personal hat and your professional hat. But when you have your own business, the two go hand in hand. So if you are struggling on a personal level, that's going to be showing up in your business. And so, how do you cope with that? How do you unpack that? And so, I like to really use the tools and share the tools that I have learned that taking that inventory and kind of being able to have that vulnerability portion just to like get it out of you. So, anyway, I share all of that because one, everybody is invited, and two, just to really, even if you don't come, I really think the power of having a journaling practice is very impactful, both personally and professionally. So just wanted to share that too.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. I am going to make sure to have all the links for them to be easy for them to find out about these circles. And yeah, so the final question usually that I like to ask is like how this intersection between personal brand story and messaging, especially story-driven messaging, how will you summarize this with 1 to 3 words?
My motto is your stories matter. So that's how I would summarize it. I think that all of us have stories that very much matter. They really are our purpose. I think we really experience things that it is our job to then take the lessons we've learned and share them to really just be helpful and impactful for other people. So That's what
Beautiful. I need to share this. Now it's backwards. So it's like this. Is also my motto. It's connected. I feel it's like your story is relevant and it's worth telling. I
love
have
it.
this postcard that I share with people just as a reminder. Um,
Great.
so yeah, we are totally aligned with that. And as a way to summarize, I will say that is a key ingredient. One to the other, they are key because how you share your personal brand story will shape your messaging, and how using your personal brand story in your messaging is key.
Love it.
So thank you so much for this conversation, Jessica. As I said, the links are going to be in the description, updated with this invitation that you have for everyone listening. Thank you for sharing your insight, and it has been really interesting to talk to someone working around stories as well.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. And thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. And for everyone listening or watching the replay, yeah, thanks, and see you soon.